about her writing because she talks about the ancient romance. And the novel is more or less a modern novel. Clara Reeve, again, who believed that through her writings she could instill moral values and promote good virtues, right? Glorify virtues, and that's what Clara Reeve also did. Therefore, she's known as a moralist, as austere and a moralist as Richardson. So, lesson of crime where guilty is punished. All her works would talk about crime and punishment. Anybody in her fiction who has committed a crime, any kind of crime, is bound to be punished. So there is no escaping from wrongdoings. So it's a lesson which she needed to send across through her writings. Terror School. David Simple is a work which was published in 1744 by Sarah Fielding. Sarah Fielding is a sister of Henry Fielding, a very prominent novelist. So she occasioned, her kind of David Simple, which was published in 1744, is a lot of time compared with Richardson's Pamela. But unlike Pamela, here she has tried to modify the picaresque type of novel. What you will find is her kind of shrewd observations of different phases of London life in her works. David Simple is an exaltation of friendship. Through this novel, David Simple talks about the significance of friendship. She's sort of glorifying friendship through her writings. Most of the themes that you will find in her works, because she's very shrewdly and very minutely observed the London life, the different phases of London life, and the reflections of these observations could be found in her novels. Social pretensions as a theme is another focus of this writer. She would rather focus on the characters' sentiment and the emotional states. Therefore, her writings can be considered as the sentimental novel. It can go into that category, the sentimental novel, because her focus is not the setting, it's neither the theme, it's it's not the story, the plot. The main focus would be the characters, sentiment, and the emotional state. She also wrote the first English novel which was ever written for children, which is known as The Governess. The Governess was published in 1749. It is believed that this is the only documented evidence that we have. Nobody has contested it yet, that she has written the first children's novel, The Governess. She also this first English novel that was written for children, The Governess, was published in 1749. After having discussed most of the minor novelists of the Romantic age, it is time that we devote some time to the most prolific and the most significant novelist of this age, that is Jane Austen. Jane Austen was born in 1775. It is Jane Austen who made a mark in fiction writing, being a woman. Her novels, as we all know, are read, reread. After all these centuries, it's still relevant, and it's still being read and appreciated by literature lovers. the connoisseurs of literature. So Jane Austen, who was born in 1775 and she died in 1817, we'll see that the first novel written by Jane Austen is Pride and Prejudice. Pride and Prejudice has very recently also been adapted into films. We are also aware that they've been adapted into teleserials. So the popularity of Jane Austen's novel is still exists. You can find the themes of property, marriage, status of women, dysfunctional nature of the English village, and the decline of gentry. These are all very, very close to a woman, the issues that she discusses. She, in fact, is the voice of the woman of that period, who talks about the themes of property, marriage, the status of women, dysfunctional nature of the English village, and the decline of gentry. These are very, very prominent themes of her writings. Apart from that, you also find that she talks about the descriptions of festivities, marriage alliances. Her novels talk about the countryside, the clergy. What she very intelligently does is she downplays emotion, because women writers are more prone to being emotional, and their emotions are being expressed through their writings, which Jane Austen was deliberate to downplay it. She didn't want her work to be branded as an emotional, kind of work, like all women do. So she downplays emotion, but at the same time, she ensures that it makes an intelligent reading. She by providing intelligent and sharply perceptive observations of the writers through her writings. Her kind of novels are class apart. Austen's ironic tone is unmatched in literary language. The kind of language that Jane Austen used was class. It gave voice to the educated women. She belonged to a very good family, and her education and upbringing certainly played a major role in her kind of writings. And therefore, there was nobody to match up to her standards. If we look at the ironic tone that she uses in her language, she certainly talks about the foibles of the society. Social criticism is her forte. Through her novels, she certainly depicts the foibles of the society, but she certainly uses irony for this purpose. So the impact is doubled. Northanger Abbey is her first work. It's a comic version of the Gothic romance. We've already discussed the Gothic romance written by Anne Radcliffe. So that kind of scary, gory, the darkest side of human life, which is being portrayed in Gothic romance, that is being made fun of through Northanger Abbey. So Jane Austen has experimented with this novel by making fun of the Gothic romance. We need to focus on Jane Austen's characters. You will find that most of her characters are from the aristocracy, and upper middle class of the English village. Now, these kind of characters is what her primary focus has been. The material that she got, they were from the personal experience that she had. She certainly sheared away, she kept away from all kind of digressions, commonplace moralizing, hysterical sentiments. So you'll not find a lot of emotions and sentiments being displayed. Even the heroines are very, very careful not to emote themselves. The lovely weather of romance and the prattle of young ladies to their confidants. These are some of the major aspects that she talks of. I repeat once again, commonplace moralizing, hysterical sentiment, the lovely weather of romance, and the prattle of young ladies to the confidants. These are the general kind of themes that you will find in the women fiction, which very cleverly, very intelligently, very shrewdly Jane Austen avoids talking about in her fiction. Through character building, what she does is she stresses the need for early education. She says how character building is very important, and that is possible only through good education. So the environment, she talks about environment, she talks about the wealth and poverty. So social aspects are being discussed. Her works include Emma, Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, Mansfield Park, and Persuasion. These are all very popular works of Jane Austen. There's another aspect to her, that is, she's a realist, gave anew to the novel in art and a style. Her kind of fiction writing gave women writing a standing. They were taken seriously. She's a realist she has a unique art and style. She uses the language of everyday life, but with a tinge of its slang, she uses it. There's one work which was published in 1814. The title of the novel is Mansfield Park. It talks about the revival of society and, moral revival of a family and the culture. The character Fanny Price is a very popular virtuous heroine in English literature. This is the creation of Jane Austen. All her female characters are, she has certainly created intelligent characters, thinking female characters in her work. And at the same time, all her novels are superior morally, ethically, and intellectually. So it's a very strong and clear message to the women across. Let us also conclude by talking about two minor writers, Charlotte Smith, who was born in 1749 and who died in 1806, established conventions of Gothic novels, political novels of sensibility. That was her contribution. Charlotte Lennox, who was born in 1729-30, supposedly. 1804 she died. And her kind of works, the female cohort, as it says, it inverts the Don Quixote. The Ladies' Museum, Henrietta, Sophia, Eliza, and Euphemia. These are the works of Charlotte Lennox. So Charlotte Lennox as well as Charlotte Smith. These two writers have been quite minor ones, but they certainly contributed. Now, before we end this session, I would just like to sum up as to what we discussed. We began by talking about the features of the romantic fiction. The fiction written during the Romantic Age, you find that there are different kinds of novels were written: Gothic novels, historical novels, local ones, as you call, or the regional ones, picaresque, epistolary novels. We also talked about the effect or the influence of the French Revolution and the feminist treatise by Mary Wollstonecraft, which rather influenced a lot of women writers, and the themes that they chose for their novels. We also find that the women novelists of this romantic period rather focused on the local settings. They talked about not just England, but rather tried to explore the local settings such as the Ireland and the Scotland. So the culture and the lifestyles, the society of the Irish and the Scottish society and culture is also explored by these writers. You'll find the observations of English life through these writings, which were probably not a main focus of the male writers. The manners of the aristocracy, romanticized accounts of the rural life were some of the works, some of the themes written by her. Now, before I conclude, I would also like to talk about the two other themes which were discussed, that is the role of community and motherhood, which were also initiated by these women writers. For further reading, the kind of books which would help you explore more on these women novelists include The Development of the English Novel by Wilbur Elsie, A Short History of English Literature by Pramod K. Nair, English Literature by William J. Long, History of English Literature by Edward Albert, A History of English Literature by Dr. Sharad Rajimwale, and A History of English Literature, a very simple text for students, that is by J.N. Mundra and S.A. Mundra. It's written by Indian authors. The volume 2, there are 3 volumes of this history book. So the second volume is quite useful to these students. It can be quite useful since they have explored all the women writers in all these books, in all these works. So what is important is when we talk about the fiction writers, the women fiction writers of this particular age, you need to remember all these writers. So beginning with the influential